In the wake of the failure that conservatives have left us, we now have the opportunity, indeed the imperative, of building a progressive movement that doesn't simply change which party controls Washington, but begins an era of reform that the country desperately needs. And as we've tried to be clear in different sessions, this won't be easy and it won't be simple. It's going to take a long time. It will require the largest mobilization ever this year to register people to vote, to educate them, to get them out to vote. We're going to have a major debate over the next months on the war, on the economy, on energy and health care. But we need to engage not just on issues, but as Norman Lear told us this morning, on kind of the basic terrain of country and God. As you saw in the civil rights panel discussion yesterday about looking back at the King and Kennedy years, even if we're successful, the tensions and pressures that come with dealing even with a sympathetic president are not easy and require us to have a great independence and strategic view. And so we wanted to end the conference with a final discussion about this strategic sense. Well, how are we thinking about this incredible moment going forward? And we wanted to bring people with very different angles of sight, but remarkable leaders in the progressive movement, to ask them both to discuss their own perspective, to have a conversation between them for a while, and then to give us some final words. They're going to introduce each other as they speak seriatim, but I want to just mention their names at once. David Bonior, who I will introduce, has just come off the John Edwards campaign, where he is his campaign manager. Cecile Richards is a special talent and is now the president of Planned Parenthood and the head of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Deepak Bhargava is executive director of the Center for Community Change, an organization which is dedicated to empowering low-income people across the country. And Anna Berger is the head of Change to Win, 7 unions, 6 million workers, secretary-treasurer of SEIU, the largest union, oversees SEIU's political operations, where, as a footnote, they just helped do a lot of heavy lifting in the Donna Edwards challenge, successful challenge in the Maryland race. So these are 4 extraordinary leaders. We're going to start with David Bonior. I'm going to ask them each to speak for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to have a discussion. I first met David when he was leading the fight as a congressman against Reagan's grotesque wars in Central America. And he, in the Congress, was a true progressive on questions of foreign policy, of human rights, of trade and economics. This was a voice, really a true voice for workers. He, immensely respected by his colleagues, he became the majority whip and then, alas, the minority whip. He left the Congress to chair and serve as chair as America's Rights to Work, pushing to change our laws so that workers once more would have the elemental right to organize and to negotiate at the workplace. And then this last year, he left there to become the campaign manager for the John Edwards campaign. And I think all of us are in a debt to the John Edwards campaign. He opened that campaign in New Orleans. And he drove the debate. He was the first one to do universal health care, and the other candidates moved to match him. He was the first one to bring poverty and put it on the agenda. He was the first one to talk in a populist voice about what was going on in our economy. He was the first one to challenge the trade policies, and the other candidates moved his way. So to the extent that we have been successful in helping to drive a debate among Democrats so that the Democratic contenders now for the nomination are more populist and more bold and more clear about the war, about the economy, about health care than they were when they started the campaign, we owe a good portion of that to John Edwards and to David Bonior. It's a pleasure to introduce David Bonior.
Well, good afternoon to you all. It's wonderful to be here, and Bob, thank you for those kind comments. First of all, I want to thank you and Roger over here for your leadership, for steering us on this ship to progressivity, for bringing us together, for laying out some ideas, some plans, and hopefully developing here some strategies that will move us forward. As Bob said, I just came off of a presidential campaign, and not only as a campaign manager, but I did a lot of surrogate work. In other words, I was out in the field. I was out in Iowa, New Hampshire. I was in 70 of the 99 counties in Iowa having meetings with between 10 and 30 people, every county in New Hampshire. So I got a sense, a recent sense, of what is really going on out there in small towns all across America, and big towns as well. And I think it will come to no surprise to any of you here today that the message of change is carrying the day. The folks in the country see Washington, D.C. as broken. They see it controlled by the powerful and the special interest. They see their country at war. They see us in the grips of a recession. They see their country without a moral compass. But what they still have, and what has not been taken away from them, is a word that we've heard a lot of this campaign, and that's hope. You know, in Romans, it is said that when you struggle, you produce perseverance. And perseverance produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us. So what we've seen over these past year and a half, is incredible numbers of people participating in the political system. Enormous numbers, numbers unheard of, unprecedented numbers, all over this country, all over the country. And what people are saying is they want leaders who will show courage, who are not afraid to lead with new ideas and new ways, and they're rewarding those who are stepping up and providing that kind of leadership. The nation is indeed ready for progressive change, as more so, I would say, than any time in my life. And what Bob and Roger and all of you have done here, and what my brothers and sisters in the labor movement have done, and the other movements that are represented here today, is create the opportunity for that change. We have an unprecedented opportunity before us. I want to speak briefly to 4 areas where I think we can actually make a huge difference. And I'll tick them off, and then I'll talk about them for a minute each. Ending this war, empowering workers to join unions and thereby rebuilding the middle class in America. Thirdly, to create a new green energy economy. And fourthly, to fix this healthcare system with a universal health care in this country. And to do this, it's going to take an enormous, not only amount of energy, but strategic thinking, as Bob has said, planning every step of the way. It won't happen by itself. Just because X gets elected to the Congress or to the presidency doesn't mean it's going to happen. If you want justice, A. Philip Randolph, I think, said it best, justice is not given, it's exacted. You got to fight for it. No one's going to give it to you out of the goodness of their heart, or their wallets, or their pocketbooks, or their budget. You've got to stand up and you've got to fight for it, because believe me, the other side, the Nova Gorquist, the Tom DeLays, that whole world will be fighting very hard to retain what they have taken from the progressive movement, particularly over these past 35 years. Ending the war, number 1. Country's ready for it. Is there any doubt about that? The world is ready for it. Too many lives have been lost. Too many bodies have been broken. Our moral standing in the world has been destroyed. And of course, the cost in dollars is staggering. Joseph Stiglitz projected recently, we're talking about roughly $3 trillion, excuse me. It's one of the great colossal disasters in American history, this war. So the country is ready for that. And we have to be ready. And I know some of us are going to be ready right after this event to raise our voice and to make sure we end this war, bring our troops home, and reestablish our moral and credibility throughout the world today. So that's number one. The second one may come as a bit of a surprise to some of you because it's not talked about enough, although it has been talked about in this presidential campaign. That's why I'm particularly proud about how John Edwards led this debate in this campaign. And that's rebuilding the middle class and doing it through rebuilding the labor movement today. Now, for some of you out there who are in the environmental movement or the civil liberties movement or some other movements out there who are part of this grand coalition and who don't think that the labor movement is important, I really want to address this to you. You cannot have a progressive movement without a workers' movement and a labor movement. It just doesn't work. It hasn't worked historically. And we have a chance to change all of those union density numbers around by passing the Employee Free Choice Act. So join us in doing it. We passed it this last Congress in the House, 51 votes in the Senate. We're going to have a great opportunity to do that as we take over, hopefully, well, I guess I'm not supposed to say taking over the government, the rules of this conference, but I think you know where I'm going here. Every day in this country, people are fired for trying to organize a union. Every single day. And if we want to close that income gap, and we want to give people a voice at work, and we want to create the infrastructure to move even more the progressive movement, we have got to get this passed. So that is indeed a priority that I ask all of you to stand with us and join with us. You know, when the National Labor Relations Act was passed back in 1935, it was passed with the intention to increase union membership and thereby America's ability to buy more and to expand the nation's aggregate demand. It was passed not only as a social justice issue, but as an economic piece of getting the country moving again. And we are back there, and we need your help in making sure that we get that done. Thirdly, let's rebuild this country with a green, new energy economy. We need that done. I think all of you know that the resources are there to do that. The energy is there to do that. The country has accepted this idea as something that we need to do to go forward, and we can get it done. Progressives need to lead the way on conserving our natural resources and demanding the tools to get it done. Progressives need to be the ones that demand that we build a new energy, green economy job market, creating millions of new jobs. We ought to be doing things like they did at Berkeley, California, where they're requiring every homeowner to have, through their tax system, solar heat and water heat. It's a big city. It can get done all across this country. There are countless examples. And we can do it with good union jobs, too. We've got to marriage that piece together with the overall idea of greening our economy and reducing gas house emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And then finally, I'll end with this, and maybe Anna and others will want to talk to it as well. Universal health care. How outrageous is it that here we are in one of the most prosperous countries in the world, that roughly almost 50 million people don't have any health insurance today. Costs are skyrocketing. We can do better. And I'm extraordinarily proud of John Edwards leading this debate, coming up with a universal plan a year ago, creating the opportunity and the path to move into a single-payer plan through his plan, making sure that it's universal and it's paid for. It's an outrage that people who are taking care of our families, our mothers and our fathers in nursing homes, are paid $9 and sometimes less an hour to care for them. We can do better. We can have better health care. We can have more better organized health care. And believe me, the country is ready for that as well. So those are four big ideas. But the time is right. People are psychologically prepared to get these things done. And it's going to take each and every one of us here today pushing whomever is running the government to get them done. Remember, the pressure that you apply will pay enormous dividends in the future. Thank you.
Deepak Bhargava, our next speaker, is an extraordinary talent. He is the head of the Center for Community Change, as I said earlier. That is an organization with a network of community organizations across the country, which is dedicated to empowering people of low income and people in our urban areas and bringing them into the capacity to make real change. He came to that position after serving as the legislative director of ACORN, again working with low-income people. And he is one of the most eloquent analysts of progressive strategy, looking at it not from the top down like too many people in Washington do, but from the community up. And I look forward to the challenge that he will issue us today. Deepak.
Good afternoon. I'm so grateful to be here with you and so grateful for the work of the Campaign for America's Future. I do want to issue a challenge today about our progressive future. It does seem like the progressive bus that all of us have been moving down the highway is making some progress. And after 8 long years, 8 long and brutal years, that really is worth celebrating. But the big question for progressive today, I would submit to you, are who is on our bus? Who's driving the bus? Where is this bus going? Who might we run over along the way? So our history is instructive. Our Republican president, Richard Nixon, gave us affirmative action and proposed a guaranteed annual income for the poor. Our last Democratic administration gave us welfare reform, NAFTA, a disastrous crime bill, and a terrible immigration bill. Now, before you get violent on me, my point is not that elections do not matter. They matter a great deal. The point is that it is the strength of outside movements and who and what we hold to be at the moral and political center of our work that really determines our collective future. So as happens every even-numbered year, there will be massive voter mobilization efforts in low-income communities of color all across the country this year. The central question from my perspective is, will those constituencies be central or marginal to the progressive agenda after the election is fought and won? So this question is going to play out in very big and in small ways in 2009. So will we put justice for the survivors of Hurricane Katrina at the center of a 2009 agenda? How about eliminating or at least reducing poverty? What about a path to citizenship for 12 million undocumented immigrants who are living and working in the shadows and subject to incredible exploitation and abuse? And I have to say, the evidence of the last couple of years is not entirely heartening as we think about the agenda going forward. So as we speak, a small but hearty band of House Democrats are pushing to put a bill on the floor that would be just as bad as the Tancredo bill several years ago that sparked the mass mobilizations in the immigrant community. And that is, from my point of view, wresting defeat from the jaws of victory. Even in the context of the issues that we know will be up in 2009, these questions about race and class become central. So one of the hidden consequences of climate change legislation, which all of us rightly support, is that if we do nothing, the increase in energy prices would amount to a tax of $1,000 on the poorest 20% of Americans, who earn about $13,000 per year. So we will face a very real question about whether, as progressives, we are willing to hold as a bottom line including in that legislation provisions that hold the poor families harmless to any negative consequences on their income as part of climate change legislation. We know that there'll be a debate about universal health care next year. We also know from the S-chip debate that we just had that the leading wedge in that debate that will be used by conservatives is access to coverage for immigrants, including legal immigrants. So will we throw immigrants under the bus in the name of political expediency? And if we do, we should probably call the legislation health care for more of us, not health care for all of us. So my friend and colleague John Powell has made the case for an approach to progressive policy he calls targeted universalism, which is kind of a wonky way of saying a very important thing. The idea is that we should push for broad policies that in fact do benefit everyone, but in so doing we pay special attention to the most vulnerable parts of our coalition, typically in our society low-income people of color. That extra attention is necessary because our history shows that even historic advances of the kind that were achieved in the New Deal don't end up benefiting everyone, certainly not everyone most in need. The Federal Housing Administration created redlining. The unemployment insurance and AFDC system for a long time excluded low-income women and women of color. Now, I think it would be more, this is not just a moral issue of inclusion. It is also a strategic question. It's a question of whether we can show that electoral outcomes make a real and tangible difference in the actual day-to-day lives of poor people and people of color, and in so doing, replace what has become a vicious cycle of under-participation and under-delivery by politicians with a virtuous cycle of increasing participation and increasing delivery by politicians. And it's also a question of whether we want to build a progressive movement that can win not only today, but also in the demographically changing America that is now arriving. So, in conclusion, the challenge is to embrace three basic principles. First, the idea of community values, the idea that we are all in it together, that we are striving together to build a beloved community. That means that everybody is on the bus. We don't let anyone get run over, and especially not the most vulnerable, those who are experiencing the most suffering. Second, it means that we have a collective obligation to strengthen and build organizations in low-income communities of color, unions, community organizations, others, that can have an authentic voice for those constituencies, real power, so that in our larger progressive coalition, they are able to make their voices heard and have the clout to do so. Finally, that we not confuse the electoral road with a progressive bus. So this is a mistake that conservatives and the conservative movement never made. Elections are critical as means, they are not ends in themselves. So finally, the progressive challenge as I see it is we have, and I agree with Bob's framing, a historic once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make major changes in our society, in our economy, and in our movement itself. We will not achieve a progressive victory in this country without having the interests, the constituencies, the concerns of the people who are suffering the most in our society. We can't have progressive victory if we don't have an end to poverty and racial injustice in the society. So it's up to all of us to rise to that challenge of building that beloved community and making victory not just this year, but victory in 2009. Thank you very much. So it's my special honor to introduce somebody who I think of as the decathlete of the progressive movement. So she's been a community organizer, a labor organizer. She's done electoral politics. She's built a powerful national coalition to strengthen our ability to mobilize voters. She's been active in civil rights and economic justice, in women's rights, in the struggle in her current role for reproductive rights and freedom as head of Planned Parenthood for America. I can't think of a better, more inspiring leader than Cecile Richards.
Good afternoon. It's so dark out there. Are you guys okay? All right. Well, it's great to be here. I want to say before I start, so I don't break any more rules than I'm already planning on, I'm here today as the president of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. So that's our political arm, and so that's the caveat, because the only thing that is reliable at the Campaign for America's Future conferences is the right wing always tapes me and puts it up on the web immediately. So I just want to so get the tapes rolling right now, guys. But that's the story. Okay, nothing. Before I start, I want to say that was unbelievable, Jim Gilliam. I mean, nothing better than a convert. I was just like. Warm my heart. Okay, it's great to be back at the annual Renaissance Weekend for Progressives. Thank you to Bob and Roger for bringing us all together, really. And as folks have said, it's an amazing time. I mean, people are voting like rabbits everywhere. Maybe that's just the job I have now. It's the way I think. But, I mean, it's amazing. My God, for 15 minutes, even Texas was important in this election. And as progressives, we're always in a really good mood when we're together, but there is something different this year. And I think it is that, 8 years in the wilderness, it finally feels like it might actually be our time. And I feel like the far right has finally worn out their welcome. Fear and division are stale, and the politics of change, as everyone has said, are in vogue, and that is a good thing because progressives are ready to lead, and the people of this country are ready for what we are bringing. It feels good for a change, and even for us most hard-bitten cynics. This is a real adjustment, because let's face it, I think as progressives we are great at finding fault with whoever is in office, but we're not so hot at being in charge. And I think it is going to mean something different, and I think Deepak's points were well made. It means actually we're going to have to work with some folks, though, that aren't perfect and that don't see everything the same way that we do. Because let's face it, there is only one Jan Schakowsky in the U.S. Congress, right? Although, hear the good news, because Donna Edwards is coming to Capitol Hill, and it's going to change America. But I think what folks have said and what is really important, I think if there is a theme here today, it is this: when progressives win in November, if we can say that, that's just the ticket to the dance. And it only means that we've got a fighting chance, and we're going to have to bring everything we've got to move this country forward. Because the last thing we need to do is replace compassionate conservatives with complacent progressives, right? That's just not going to work. Because we've seen how that works out. I think the challenge for us is not just to win in November, it's how do we keep winning in January and February and March and on and on. My dream is 24 years of uninterrupted progressive power. That's just, because I think that's what we're going to need actually to address a lot of the issues that have been raised here today. But so here's the two things I think about. In the next 7 months, we as progressives have an unbelievable opportunity to build our ranks. We have got to take the millions of Americans who are out there waking up politically this election, and we've got to attach them to our movement, whether it is labor or it's Move On or it's Acorn or it's Planned Parenthood. We've got to build long-term and sustainable grassroots movement like we haven't ever seen before, and we just don't get that many chances. So that's my plea to you. And the second thing is, and this is really from my role now where I sit at Planned Parenthood, which is we got to take organizations like Planned Parenthood and we got to get serious about politics. Because sometimes we don't need to just start new things. We got to take old things and make them new again. And, because we got a lot of stuff out there, and we got to make it work this time. So here's the deal. Planned Parenthood is the largest, most respected reproductive health care provider in America, has been for 91 years. We have more than 850 health centers in every state in America. We see 5 million patients every single year for health care. 97% of it's preventative health care. 2.3 million women for birth control. 900,000 breast exams last year. 1.3 million cervical cancer screenings. The list goes on and on and on. And the truth is that awesome? I mean, my God. Okay, thanks. But here's the deal. The women and teens who come to our clinics, they're not coming to make a political statement. They come to us because for most of them, we're the only health care option they have in this country. But when they come to us, and when women come to us, they're coming to us for more than birth control pills. They count on us to fight for their rights, and everyone's right, to full reproductive health care in this country, period, right? That's the deal. They are counting on us to speak up and to speak out, and make no mistake, this election we will. And this is why, because if we don't, we aren't doing our job, all right? Listen to this. Last week, the Centers for Disease Control, you may have seen this, reported that 1 in 4 teenage girls in America has a sexually transmitted infection. That's 1 in 4 of our girls. And now that is what $1.5 billion of abstinence-only programming will buy you, okay? Now, we can open up Planned Parenthood clinics from here to eternity. But if we don't get folks in office who understand that teens in America need education, not just a right-wing slogan, then we have failed, my friends. You know, we have funded, it's true, we have funded Planned Parenthood programs around the world to reduce maternal mortality, and it's important work. But if the global gag rule of this country makes it illegal for women to get freaking family planning, it's not going to work, you know? It's not going to work, and we aren't doing our job. And we can open up Planned Parenthood clinics in every small town and community in America, but it isn't worth a damn if the next president appoints the 5th right-wing Supreme Court justice who votes to overturn Roe versus Wade, okay? It's not going to work. It's not enough. So that's the deal. So this year, we're putting it all on the line. And the Planned Parenthood Action Fund is taking our millions of supporters, and we're putting them on the doors and in the streets. Folks who are patient escorts today, this summer, they're knocking on doors. Our board members are becoming phone bankers. We are literally mobilizing 1 million strong, 1 million of our supporters in critical states. And in doing so, we are going to elect a president that, as David said, will fight alongside us to make affordable health care a right in this country, not a privilege, right? We're going to elect a president who believes that women are actually fully capable of making decisions about bearing children and do not need the help of a bunch of desiccated U.S. senators to interfere. No, gracias. No, thank you. And come hell or high water, we are going to elect a president who's going to take this $1.5 billion disaster known as abstinence only and end it and replace it with real sex education for young people in America. So that's what we got to do. So in short, and this is my plea to those of you who are in organizations who need to make this launch, to make this step. This year, the largest reproductive health care provider in the country aims to become the largest kick-ass grassroots organization in America fighting for our health and rights, and not just in November, but more importantly, after November. Because candidates and elections come and go, as David said, but the progressive movement continues on. Got it? All right. So I'll just end with this. Look, I'm going to be damned if we're going to stand by and let George Bush or Samuel Alito or John McCain dismantle the right of women in this country to choose. Game over, right? So all I need to know is, are you going to stand with us? Are you with us? Because if you are, we're going to stand with you. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, you don't even say okay, but thanks. All right, we're all standing together.